They would say later that she had stolen everything, that a mere maid had bewitched a dying man into surrendering an empire with the stroke of a pen. But no one spoke of the night itself, of the hours when the house slept and power shifted quietly in the dark, because on that night Eliza Harrow did nothing more scandalous than stay. The storm had begun just before midnight, a slow gathering of wind that rattled the ancient windows of Blackthorn Manor and whispered through its endless corridors like a warning no one chose to hear. By the time the rain came, sharp, relentless, striking the stone walls with a fury that felt almost deliberate, the household had already withdrawn into itself. Servants retired early at the housekeeper's instruction, their duties reduced in deference to the solemn expectation that hung over the estate. The old duke was dying, and death, in a place like this, was treated not with grief but with preparation. Lawyers had come and gone all week, their leather cases snapping shut with finality. Distant relatives had appeared as if conjured by rumor alone, filling guest rooms with polite voices and watchful eyes. And above them all moved Lord Adrian Blackthorn, the Duke's only son, already carrying the weight of inheritance in the rigid line of his shoulders, his presence as cold and immovable as the marble statues lining the great hall. Eliza kept out of their way. She had been at Blackthorn Manor for barely 3 months, one of the many new hires brought in to maintain appearances during the Duke's decline, and she understood instinctively that invisibility was her greatest asset. She moved quietly, spoke only when spoken to, and kept her gaze lowered in the presence of those who could dismiss her with a word. It was safer that way, safer not to be noticed, not to be remembered. And yet, as the storm deepened and the house settled into an uneasy silence, something shifted. The bell rang. It was a faint sound, almost lost beneath the howl of wind, but unmistakable, a single, sharp chime from the Duke's private chambers. Eliza paused in the servants' corridor, her hands still damp from the last of her evening duties. Someone would answer it, she thought. Someone important. Someone whose place it was to respond. But the minutes stretched, and no footsteps came. No doors opened. The house remained still, as though the storm had swallowed not only sound but responsibility itself. The bell did not ring again. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Drawing a slow breath, Eliza turned toward the main staircase. She told herself it was only practicality, that she was simply fulfilling a duty neglected by others, but the truth was harder to name. Something about the silence felt wrong, too complete, too deliberate. The corridors leading to the Duke's chambers were dimly lit, the lamps turned low in quiet acknowledgement of his condition. Portraits loomed from the walls, their painted eyes following her ascent with silent judgment. Generations of Blackthorn men who had ruled, commanded, and never once been ignored. Until now. She stopped outside the heavy oak door, her hand hovering just above the handle. From within came the faint sound of breathing, uneven, strained, but unmistakably present. "Come in," a voice rasped, thin but sharp enough to cut through hesitation. Eliza froze. She had not knocked. For a moment, she considered retreating, convincing herself she had misheard, but the voice came again, weaker this time, yet edged with impatience. "Don't linger like a ghost. Either enter or leave me to die properly." The words, stark and unadorned, settled something in her. She pushed the door open. The room was warmer than the rest of the house, the fire burning low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the walls. The Duke lay against a mountain of pillows, his once formidable frame diminished by illness. Yet there was nothing fragile about the way his eyes fixed on her. They were clear, too clear for a man so close to the end, and filled with a kind of piercing awareness that made Eliza feel as though she had stepped into something far larger than herself. "You're not one of them," he said, studying her with unsettling intensity. "No, Your Grace," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, passed through his expression. "Good. Stay." The command was quiet, but it carried the weight of habit, of a lifetime spent being obeyed without question. Eliza hesitated. This was not her place. There were nurses for this, attendants, people trained and expected to sit vigil over a dying man. But none of them were here. And he had asked her. No, he had told her. She moved closer, setting aside her uncertainty with the same practicality that had brought her to the door in the first place. Hours passed in fragments. The storm raged outside, but within the chamber time seemed to stretch and fold in on itself, marked only by the rise and fall of the Duke's breathing and the occasional crackle of the fire. At first, he said nothing more, his eyes drifting closed as though he had forgotten her presence entirely. But then he spoke again, not to her exactly, but into the space between them, his voice slipping in and out of clarity as memory took hold. He spoke of decisions made too quickly and too late, of alliances forged for power and broken for pride, of a son who had learned duty but not understanding. Eliza did not interrupt. She did not pretend to comprehend the full weight of what he revealed, nor did she offer comfort she had no right to give. She simply listened. It was, she would later realize, the only thing he truly wanted. At some point in the long, uncertain stretch before dawn, his hands shifted against the coverlet, searching. Without thinking, Eliza reached out, her fingers brushing his. His grip tightened with surprising strength, anchoring her there. "They think I don't see," he murmured, his gaze sharpening once more. "They think dying makes a man blind." Eliza said nothing. "But I see everything," he continued, his voice gaining a faint edge of urgency. "I see who waits and who does not." The words settled heavily in the quiet room. Outside, the storm began to fade, the rain softening to a steady whisper against the glass. The Duke's breathing grew more labored, each inhale a visible effort. And then, with a sudden clarity that cut through the haze of the night, he turned his head toward her fully. "Bring me the documents," he said. Eliza stilled. "Your Grace." "The ones in the study," he insisted, his grip tightening further. "Top drawer. You'll know them." She hesitated, the enormity of the request pressing down on her. "Should I fetch the solicitor? Or your son?" "No," the word was sharp, absolute. "You." A pause, heavy with meaning. "Before I lose my nerve." Something in his tone, something final, left no room for refusal. Slowly, Eliza rose, her hand slipping from his as she stepped back. For a moment, she lingered, her gaze fixed on the man who had commanded an empire and now lay at its edge, trusting her with something she did not yet understand. Then she turned and left the room, the echo of the storm fading behind her as she walked into the silence of a house that had no idea what was about to change. By morning, the storm had passed, but the quiet it left behind was far more dangerous because it did not last. Blackthorn Manor awoke not to mourning, but to uproar. Voices clashed in the great study, sharp with disbelief and outrage, as though grief had been pushed aside in favor of something far more urgent: control. Eliza Harrow stood near the far wall, her hands clasped tightly before her, trying to steady the tremor that had not left her since dawn. The Duke was dead. That truth alone should have filled the house with solemnity. Instead, it had ignited chaos. "This is impossible," one of the relatives snapped, pacing furiously across the carpet. "A servant? It's laughable. It's unlawful," another insisted. "There must be grounds to overturn it." At the center of it all stood the solicitor, pale and overwhelmed, gripping the document that had turned everything upside down. "The will was signed," he repeated, though his voice lacked conviction under their scrutiny. "Witnessed and valid." The Duke was of sound mind. "He was dying," someone shot back. "That hardly counts as sound." Eliza said nothing. She could feel their stares, heavy and accusing, as though she had orchestrated something she barely understood herself. She wanted to speak, to explain that she had only followed instructions, that she had not sought this. But the words felt fragile against the storm of suspicion rising around her. Then the door opened. The sound alone silenced the room. Lord Adrian Blackthorn entered with measured calm, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Dressed entirely in black, he carried no visible sign of grief, only control, cold, precise, and absolute. His gaze swept the room once before settling on Eliza, and in that instant, she felt the full weight of her new reality. She was no longer invisible. "Explain," he said. The single word stilled what little noise remained. No one answered, until Eliza did. "Your father asked for the documents," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "He gave the instructions himself." Adrian did not look away. "What documents?" he asked. The solicitor swallowed. "The revised will, my lord." A pause stretched thin. Revised, Adrian repeated. Yes. His gaze sharpened slightly. And to whom has he left it? The hesitation was brief, but enough. Adrian's eyes returned fully to Eliza, something colder settling behind them. Miss Harrow, the solicitor said at last. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Then Adrian spoke, softer than before. No, it wasn't disbelief. It was refusal. He stepped closer, his attention fixed entirely on her. You expect me to believe, he said slowly, that my father has entrusted everything to you? Eliza met his gaze, though her heart pounded. I expect you to believe what he chose, she said. A flicker crossed his expression, sharp, unreadable. And you accepted it? The question struck deeper than the accusations surrounding them. Eliza hesitated only briefly. He insisted. Adrian's jaw tightened. Around them, whispers resumed, quieter now, but more venomous. Opportunist. Manipulator. Liar. Each word pressed against her, but she did not look away. I didn't ask for this, she said. No, Adrian replied. But you didn't refuse it. The truth of that lingered. Because she hadn't refused. Because in that moment, standing beside a dying man, refusal had not felt like an option. It had felt like betrayal. He was alone, she said quietly. The words cut through the murmurs. Adrian stilled. Just for a moment. Something shifted in his gaze, not softened, but unsettled, as though she had touched something he did not expect her to reach. But it was gone as quickly as it came. This changes nothing, he said. It changes why, she replied. Their eyes held, tension coiling between them. Not just anger, but something more complicated, more dangerous. Finally, Adrian exhaled slowly. This will be contested, he said. You understand that? Yes. You will be questioned, challenged, torn apart until something gives. Eliza lifted her chin slightly. I understand. Another pause. Then, quieter, more deliberate. And yet you stay. Eliza drew a steady breath. He trusted me, she said. That has to matter. Adrian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not agreement, not acceptance, but acknowledgement. We'll see, he said. And in those two words lay the beginning of something far greater than a dispute over a will. The beginning of a battle neither of them could yet fully understand. By nightfall, the manor had fallen into a tense, watchful silence, the kind that comes before something breaks. Eliza stood alone in the study, staring out at the darkened estate that now, impossibly, belonged to her, though it felt less like ownership and more like standing at the center of a storm. She heard him before she saw him. You could still renounce it, Adrian said from the doorway. She didn't turn. I won't. He stepped inside, measured and controlled as ever. This isn't a gift, he said. It's a war. Eliza faced him then, her expression steady. Then why didn't he leave it to you? The question hung between them. Adrian's jaw tightened. Because he didn't trust me. There was no anger in it, only truth. Eliza held his gaze. He trusted me because I stayed. A silence followed, quieter now, heavier. That won't be enough, Adrian said. Maybe not, she replied. But I'm not walking away. He studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his cold composure. They'll come for you, he said. Family, ports, anyone who wants what you have. Eliza nodded once. Then I'll face them. Another pause. Then, more quietly, you won't survive it alone. She met his eyes. Then don't leave me to. That caught him. Just slightly. Adrian exhaled, tension easing a fraction. This house doesn't forgive weakness, he said. Then teach me not to be weak, she answered. For a moment, neither moved. Then he gave a faint nod, not agreement, but something close enough to matter. We'll see, he said. And as the shadows deepened around them, one thing became certain. This was no longer just about an inheritance. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, and neither of them was walking away.